Okay, so hopefully we now have a data set downloaded from Qualtrics. You've gone through, you've tried to recode everything and it needs to be in the right way. You've now gone through also and recoded any reverse scored items. You've also now gone through and looked at the reliability of each of the scales and found out they're okay. And you've also now created scale scores for each of your scales. So your data set should look something like this. Let me just be smaller here. So this is all that's happened. Here was my original questionnaire. I had to do some recoding on those. So you can see here also some rescoring, putting reverse coding items in different ways as I've gone through here. And I've got these scale scores and subscale scores. So meaning in life with these two subscales, presence and search, material values with these three subscales, centrality of material values, success and happiness, and how related to material values they are. There is just a single mindfulness scale. There is a single satisfaction with life scale. There is a single life orientation test, which is an optimism test, and there is a single self-regulation. So I've gone through, and if I look at my syntax file, I've created a little log. One thing to note, I haven't saved it yet. The little asterisk means I haven't saved it. So let me just save that to my desktop as syntax data, syntax file. Will do. For some reason it is not liking that. There we are, that's better. So you can see here, that was the original changing of the questions. This is what I did in the last video. And here is, I've actually included some reliability. So if I ran through a reliability, as I showed in the last video, as with all of these, I can paste it and that code would go in. So if I want to rerun the reliability for any particular scale, so I want to look at the reliability for mindfulness, I didn't make a note of it, I can just highlight that, click on reliability, there we go. There's my mindfulness reliability, 0.848, all great. And there's some other stats if I wanted to look at if there was a problem and I wanted to delete an item, etc. So I've done all of that. That's all looking good. So what I'd actually do now is save my file as a new file with the name something like, I like it as key variables. You can do whatever you like. But I just mean I've got my original data set untouched, the data set edited, which has now got the recoding, and then the data set now, which is only going to have those key variables. I'm going to get rid of the individual items. I don't need them anymore. So if I save that now, and it just makes it much neater. So actually, I've got the MLQ. What I'm going to do is move all of my key variables down to the bottom. So this is my life orientation test. Let's drag that down to the bottom. Here's my satisfaction with life scale. I can do this. Satisfaction with life scale, click on there, drag that down to the bottom. Mindfulness, drag that down to the bottom. I'm not bothered by the order at the moment. All of these about material values, drag those down. And the last ones, and you see I labeled these because these are the ones that are more important and it's easier to see. So I'm going to drag those down to the bottom. So now I can see, here's my key variables. So I've actually, if I put the meaning in life, and then the two subscales, self-regulation, two subscales, materialistic values, three subscales, mindfulness, no subscales, life orientation test, no subscales, and satisfaction with life. So these other ones here, I can actually, let me try and expand my window a bit. Not too much. I don't need all of the items. I'm going to leave gender in just to show. Definitely don't need to edit them. So I'm going to delete these. Delete this. Delete this. Delete these. Getting down to my recoded items. Now I'm back to my key variables. So now I have a file which is looking pretty sweet at this point because it's small, it's got my key variables. I've called it data edited key variables. I'm going to save that now. So I have my original, my edited with recoding, and my final one, which has just got my key variables in it. So this is brilliant. This is now, I know they're reliable scales. I know that I've just got people's mean scores. So even if they missed out in individual items, because I've created mean scores, this is all pretty good going. So what I could do at this point, for my descriptives in my results, I might look at some descriptive statistics for each of those. So I might do these one at a time. I might just do these by group. So I can just look at this. So these are descriptive statistics for the meaning in life and those subscales. You can see the minimum is 1, the maximum is 7. So there's a nice range of scores. I could look at the normal distribution of these if I wanted to. So I could do some graphs and I could look at some histograms. Hopefully these variables would be normally distributed, and I could run some normal distribution. Look at that, lovely. I could run some normal distribution statistics on that, some normality tests if I wanted to do such things. But I won't go into details with those. I could put in a normal curve on top of that. I don't need to do that, but you can get the idea. You can run some normality tests if you want to. I know they're all fairly normally distributed. This I might include in my data. So I might want to edit this. And just quickly how to edit it. I might want to just put it in approximate APA style for my data set. So if I just click on academic, that goes pretty much into APA style. What I might also want to do is make sure those cells only have 2 decimal places. And you see it's beginning to look better. I can click on this, and actually I generally just put SD, the standard deviation, and I might include just putting presence and search. So you can edit in here, and then I can copy. Don't probably need this row here. That's looking a much better scale table. And if I wanted to include a title, or I could just delete the title and include the title in Word, and then I can just copy that as an image, as however I want to do it, some plain text, etc., and paste that into my final report. So, or I could just take the numbers and in my report do it in a word table. It doesn't matter which way you do the tables. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on tables, but you get the idea. So I could now go through my descriptives for each of my scales, and that would be good to just get a sense that those scales are okay. They are normally distributed. I'm not going to go through all of them. You'll get the idea. You can do that on each of your scales. So let's just assume now I've gone through that. So that's all very good. I could also begin to look at the relationships between those scales. So let me just look at some correlations. So let's assume this study is about satisfaction with life, and what are the predictors in individual differences, predictors of satisfaction with life? First of all, let's just correlate those scales. So I'm going to look at the high order scales, not the subscales. So meaning in life, self-regulation, materialistic values, mindfulness, optimism, and satisfaction with life. I can begin just to look at a table of correlations. This is a big table. I don't need all of this because, as you can see, it's got a mirror image. So again, I can just edit that down. Let me just do that. I'm going to get rid of anything below the number 1. So as you can see here, meaning in life is obviously correlated 1 with meaning in life. So I never need that. Meaning in life with self-regulation is the same as self-regulation and meaning in life, 0.177. We can see that in both of those. So actually, all of this down here is the same as all of this up here. So however you want to do this, but I'm just going to just delete any of these from the number 1 down is the easiest way I find it. Highlight 1, go down, highlight 1, go down, highlight 1, go down. I could change the names of these. And again, if I wanted to, I could just put this into an academic style and make some edits on that. So I'm interested here just in the relationship. This might be picking out some issues. So you can see meaning in life is correlated with self-regulation. It's not really correlated with materialistic values. That's not significant. That's not very high. Not correlated with mindfulness. That's definitely not significant. That's not very high. It is correlated moderately with life orientation and test, which is optimism. So the more meaning in life you have, the more optimistic you are, or vice versa. You see it's significant there, and it's at 0.23, and it is significantly correlated with satisfaction with life at 0.34, which is, that's a small to moderate size correlation, which is what we're interested in here. You can see that self-regulation is significantly correlated with everything else, but not very highly. It's negatively correlated with materialistic values, negatively correlated with mindfulness, positively correlated with optimism and satisfaction with life. And we could go down and just look at some of those. That's quite interesting. Or we could pick out those that we are interested in terms of thinking about our hypotheses of what we might hypothesize as relationships. But really, we're all more interested here in a regression, trying to predict satisfaction with life and seeing which of these is the best predictor. So one of the things I'm going to look here is anything really highly strongly correlated with itself, because there are going to be problems in our regression if one of these predictors is very highly correlated with another predictor. The regression won't be able to differentiate those two variables out. If I look, for example, at the prediction of, I don't know, let's take a crazy one, shoe size, and I have height and foot size in centimeters. When I try and predict foot size, because height and foot size in predict shoe size, because height and foot size in centimeters are highly correlated, it won't be able to differentiate some of those. And so what it will probably say is foot size in centimeters is predictive of shoe size and height isn't, because all the variation that height predicts shoe size is also predicted by foot size, because people who are taller generally have bigger feet. If we think of children with very small feet and tall adults, basketball players who have very big feet, so shoe size is predicted by both those. They're really highly correlated. So that can cause a problem called multicollinearity. So I'm looking at this. The highest one is this one here, self-regulation with optimism. Those people who are more optimistic are better on self-regulation. It's not that high. I'm not too worried about that. So there doesn't seem to be a massive issue with multicollinearity. There are more formal ways of testing it, but this is a good rule of thumb. So it feels okay. So I'm just going to go on and try and look at a regression. So in this case, I click on Analyze, go down to Regression, and we'll just do a linear regression. So in this case, I'm just going to try and say, can I predict satisfaction with life from those core variables? Now, I'm not interested in the subscales here. Again, it would depend. I might look at some subscale predictors later on, but let's just let's look in the regression. Satisfaction with life scale is my key outcome here. So it's called dependent in SPSS terms. Normally, as this is a correlational study, I'll just call it an outcome because it's not dependent. We haven't manipulated anything in terms of an independent variable, but that's the terms that SPSS uses. So satisfaction with life scale is my dependent or my outcome variable, and then my independents are my predictors. So I'm going to put in meaning in life, self-regulation, materialistic values, mindfulness, and life orientation. I've got a big sample size, so I'm not too worried. There's quite a lot of predictors there. You might not have as many. There are different rules of thumb. Some people just say 10 participants per predictor. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different predictors, so at least 50 participants. Some people say at least 50 participants plus 5 participants per predictor. So in this case, I'd need 50 participants plus 25. I'd need at least 75 participants. I've got hundreds, 900. I've got enough. 700, depending on the analysis. I've got plenty here. But just do be careful about having too many predictors in comparison to your sample size, because it gets all a bit less robust and problematic when you're trying to look at that data. The modeling is difficult. So let me just go with that as is. So in this case now, what we're going to do, it's a regression. So it tells me all of the things. I've just put it all in there. I haven't tried to model it in any way. I've just said, which of these is the best predictor of satisfaction with life? So it's put all of the variables in there. And sometimes there are different models. Again, I'm not going to go into detail here. There are different ways you can do regression. It can remove some in stepwise. It can enter some in a stepwise way. This is just a standard saying, which of these predicts this outcome? The first question you really ask is it a significant model? And so I'm going to go to the ANOVA. Is this model significant? Do these variables predict in any significant way this outcome? So I'm looking at the ANOVA here, and that's significant. These do. It's a good model. My variables, these here, do predict my outcome, this dependent variable here. So I'd report that. The model is significant. Those do predict those outcomes. How much of the variation do they predict? Well, if I look here, my model summary, the best thing to look here is an adjusted R square, 0.352. We can convert that to a percent, 35%. 35% of the variation in satisfaction of life can be accounted for by these variables. Now, of course, this is just dependent on the variability in these things. If we put different variables in, that would vary. The amount accounted for might vary. We haven't put in other things that might impact on satisfaction of life, like it could be relationship satisfaction, or it could be income, or it could be job satisfaction, or any of these other things which might also account for some of those things. But given this data, and given the variability we have within this data in terms of life satisfaction, these variables themselves do account for about 35% of that variation, which is good. The model is significant and it accounts for quite a good amount. In psychology, this is about the standard size of amount of variation, and we're quite happy with that. Some models don't predict that much. It's rare that models predict much more because there's quite a lot of variability, and particularly an outcome like satisfaction with life. The more important one then is, of these variables, which are the best predictors? And actually, so what we're looking at here, if we look down the significance, well, apart from mindfulness, they're all pretty significant, okay? They all predict it. So they all add to predicting satisfaction with life. So I can look, so that's kind of useful, but I might want to think about something else in terms of, I want to think about which of them is most important. So the way to think about that is looking at my standardized coefficients. That's really saying any standardized increase, and what it looks at here is a standard deviation increase in the outcome. But so it's trying to standardize it. In other words, looking at the same size impact or increase in any of these variables in terms of its impact on the outcome. So what we're really looking for here is the highest number. So which of these, and we can see here, these two have kind of negative relationships, but they're not that, this one isn't significant, and this one is the least significant. It is significant, but remember, significance is affected by sample size, and we have a massive sample here. So this is a bit more useful. So the one that's at the highest here is the life orientation test. That is optimism. So in this model and this data, the best predictor of satisfaction with life is our orientation towards life, our level of optimism. The second strongest predictor is the amount of meaning we have in our life. So how those people who report more meaning in their life feel more satisfied with their life. The next one really that we're of interest here is those who are higher on self-regulation, but that's a little bit smaller. So you can see, despite these all having the same level of significance, we can begin to say these are important predictors, these are the more important, these are less important. And that's what a regression can do. So really you need to choose your outcome, begin looking at your predictors, and in a simple regression, simple linear multiple regression, we can put those predictors and see if they have an impact on our outcome. And we'd report all of these. We would say the model was significant. These predictors did have an impact on our outcome. It accounted for about 35% of the variation. And life orientation, so optimism in this case, was the strongest predictor, followed by meaning in life and self-regulation as being the strongest predictor of outcome, strongest predictor of satisfaction with life. Hopefully that's explained taking your data from Qualtrics to beginning to do a regression analysis. And there are more complex regressions. Any stats book will tell you different ways to do a regression if you want to model it in particular ways in terms of your data. So beginning to think about moderation and mediation if that's something that you might want to do. But this gives you the very basics of understanding a regression, making some predictors from the data that you have. Hopefully that makes sense. Good luck with it.